Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Back to School. I'm your host, David. Now, hopefully you've watched episode 4 of Setting the Scene and Firefight, and you would have seen the snowy tundra board there that I built, bleeding into kind of a defensive populated city or area. And then we did the Imperial Fist Venator here firing against the Falchion. Now, the Falchion firing against the Venator and vice versa was really interesting because it threw up a lot of questions about cover saves, and in particular for vehicles. So what I plan to do in this little video here is just go through a couple of options you've got and how to interpret them, and also how to set the standard at the beginning of your game so you don't get caught out later on down the line. It's happened to me quite a lot, and I don't want it to happen to you. First things first, let's just discuss the setup I've got here. I've got a Venator, and I have a Thallax model armed with a multi-melter. Now, I'm not going to do any dice rolls because it's kind of irrelevant here. It's just about whether something gets cover, and if so, what type of cover it is. So we'll assume that the multi-melter is always firing at the Venator here, and generally we'll say at the front armor. So what I've got here to my right hand side, I've got a camera on the desk, which hopefully you can't see. I've edited it all correctly, and will pop up on this side of the screen here. So you can see there that the Venator is dead center of the screen there, and throughout the course of this little session we are going to slide elements in and out to discuss cover. So hopefully that'll work for you. So we'll put our little Thallax here on top of the camera, which is hopefully out of shot and you can't see it. I can see it though, and it just gives me a good reference from where the firing has come from. If I can do it, I'll try and put a little white line or red line or something just to indicate the direction of fire. Okay, let's just have a quick review of the rulebook. Now, if we go to page 75 in the rule we have got in front of me, you'll see a laser vindicator, and it explains what an obscured vehicle is. Now, before we get on to that, I just want to cover a couple of things here. On the previous page, page 74, we've got vehicles and cover and obscured targets. And there's one thing which I really want to draw attention to. It's halfway down, and it says here, vehicles are not obscured simply for being inside terrain such as woods or ruins. The 25% rule given takes precedence. So what that means is we've all done this before, where we've got a vehicle in a building. Let's just assume that it's all around, and we drop barrages from a Legion Basilisk or a Medusa or whatever, and they come in, and we know that barrage weapons, to determine cover saves, they come from the center of the blast. So I've seen it, and I've done it myself. Barrage comes in, hits dead center, and then we get a cover save. We say, oh, well, my vehicle's in cover, I get a cover save, right? No, you don't. I've just reread it all just to double check my facts, and from my reckoning, you don't get a cover save. And I'm going to quickly whiz over to the barrage rules, which I will do very quickly. All right, so just quickly, I'll read it to you here. To determine whether a unit wounded by a barrage is allowed a cover save, and when determining wound allocations, always assume the shot is coming from the center of the blast marker instead of from the firing model. Hits against vehicles are always resolved against their side armor. So to me, if there is no roof on the building, it's unobstructed because it's fired up in the air, comes straight down and explodes, no cover save. Now, you might say to me, well, what if there's a roof on the building? Yeah, that's a really great point. So if there's a roof on the building and you are more than 25%, which we'll come to in a second, then should you or shouldn't you get a cover save? You could argue where the center of the blast is. If it misses the cover save, should you get it or not? Now, that's a really good point. I guess in this instant, though, wherever the center is, if it lands on the vehicle and not over the roof section, then no cover save. But if the whole of the center of the blast marker lands on the roof section, then you should get a cover save. Now, little things like this can catch you out. You can set up a shot assume that the vehicle that you're firing at isn't going to get a cover save, and then your opponent says, well, you know, I'm in cover, I'm in the confines of cover, I get a cover save. And if you're playing quite a fluid game, you'll just go, yeah, you're right, yeah, it's in cover, get a cover save, and they might make the cover save. But it's just worth bearing in mind. The onus is not perhaps on your opponent to know all the rules, you need to know your rules as well. And if you're going to run 2 or 3 barrage weapons, then you need to know the minutiae of fact about where that comes. Now, what I don't want to do is I don't want to turn Heresy into a rules lawing exercise. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to point out a few questionable interpretations of the rules, because I don't want you to get caught out, and I want to make sure that both the channel, myself, and you guys are playing a fair game, because we can't know every single rule. It's absolutely impossible. The channel doesn't always get it right, and I can guarantee you are not getting it 100% right at home. That's just fact. There is just too much to bear in mind. But if you are going to run an army with multiple barrages, then you need to be aware of those rules. So that's my interpretation. Now, if you think I'm wrong or I'm not quite right or whatever, I'd love to go through that with you. You know, let's set that up. But, you know, it's just something to bear in mind. It's my interpretation, and if I was playing a game and I knew my opponent had tons of barrage weapons, or I had tons of barrage weapons, then it'd be worth just a 5-minute chat before we get started. Anyway, so that's that one covered. I want to get that one out of the way. Is barrage has always been a contentious weapon in 40k Heresy, 8th, 7th, whatever edition. Well, maybe not in 8th, sorry, but certainly in previous editions it has been. All right, let's move on to page 75 of the rulebook and discuss obscured targets. Now, if you've got your rulebook in front of you, that would be fantastic, and then we can go through it together, which would be brilliant. Now, I know a lot of you know this, but there are some new people to Heresy, and there are a little bit of question about the rules, and this one always catches people out. Whether you're a veteran or a new person to the hobby or to 30k, it always catches people out. So when firing at a vehicle, you need to decide whether 25% of that model is obscured from the firer or not. And the way we do that, and the easiest way to do that, is to measure the height of the vehicle. So I'm ignoring the sponson weapon because I'm not too worried about that. I'm just going to literally the thickness of the vehicle. So I can see that that is 6 centimeters, okay? Now I've got a bit of cover here, and hopefully with this camera you'll be able to see me push it in and out. Look at that. That's the beauty of filming. All right, so for me and for the rulebook for you on page 75, example 1, less than 25% of the front of the Vindicator, or the Venator in this case, is hidden by the ruin. The Vindicator is not obscured. No, absolutely not. That vehicle is not in cover. And we can see that for a variety of terrain options. So we've got the Rise of Ruins there. That is not 25% for me. And then we use the crate. That is not 25% to me. This is always a tricky one. A crater. You know, the Venator is in a crater, but it does not obscure 25% of it. And if anything, it doesn't obscure anything and prevents a larger target because you can get further underneath the hull and puts it at a different angle. So that is not in cover. Okay, so I think that's really, really interesting to define. And I think maybe if you're playing a game, I don't wish to sound rude to anyone, but if you're playing a game, you've got a guy claiming a 4+ cover save, you know you're going to have a tough game. That's all I'm going to say. All right, so that's good. We've got those facts there. Example 2, more than 25% of the front of the Vindicator, Venator, hidden by the ruin. The Venator is obscured and received a 4+ cover save. So 25%. Now, without getting too technical on you, let's have a quick look. A Venator is 9 centimeters wide and it is 6 centimeters high. I know we work in inches this game, so we can do either. So I'll do 2.5 wide, 2.5 inches wide by 3.5 inches. Okay. Now, for the purposes of the camera up here, that to me is 25%. And I guess what you could do is if you really had a really, really tricky opponent and you wanted to go into such tiny, tiny detail because you're perhaps having a tough game, and if you're at this point where you're arguing about discussing cover saves, like I said, you know you're in for a tough game. So what you could do is you could take a photo and then overlay a grid on your phone, and then you've got, like, you know, you can work out 25%. Hopefully your games haven't come to that, and we certainly haven't on the channel. And everyone plays the game in good spirit, which is really cool. Now, for me, that is 25%. you can always imagine cutting the vehicle into quarters. And if one of those quarters is completely obscured, that is 25% of your vehicle. So for me, that's obscured. Go back to the old crate, 25%. So that's only a quarter. So if we divide that into 4, yoink, yeah, so that's an inch. There, that's a quarter for me. That is 25% obscured, assuming that the shot is coming from this angle. And again, I love this one. Very thematic here, particularly for the Imperial Fists. That is 25%. So instead of being 25% widthways, this now goes from the ground up. So that is 25%. So you will receive a cover save equal to the rating of the terrain. Now, generally in games for the channel, crates are 5+, reinforced concrete barriers are 4+. Same with things like additional buildings, 4+ cover save. And the rocks that we use, the natural rock, that is an absolute 4+ cover save. That is just a solid chunk of rock. So 4+ cover save. Now the next one, well, excuse me, that's it. That is all you get. You either get a cover save or you don't. 25% or more or you don't. Now what does happen sometimes is we get in really tricky circumstances where if we've got our Thalax firing from the front here, you can see virtually, there, we're like that. You know, virtually the entirety of that vehicle is covered up bar an inch. So we know 3/4 of that vehicle is obscured, but that will still only get you an obscured, which is a 4+ cover save. Now, we can get into some really tricky circumstances, particularly with ruins that have got breaks in them, where for anyone's money, that is obscured, 100%. So the target will get a 4+ cover save. Now I know Thalax is a bit different because they have a special rule where they ignore cover, but let's just not worry about that. Let's just assume this is just a melter weapon firing from a marine. It's firing. Now it's really tricky, this one. We get into a situation where it's probably best to use this. I think it's best to use this. Now the Thalax is still in the front arc of the vehicle, but it can also see the side armor of the vehicle as well. So for me, you are not hitting that front armor, you know, because when we get arcs, we have a line of sight, don't we? Where's my tape measure? Here. We do this. But here, I know it's really difficult to see, but hopefully you'll see, you can kind of see what I mean. The Thalax is in the front armor, but it's completely obscured by the target. But it can see the side armor. And this is where the rulebook does address that. So it says here, the entirety of the front armor of the Venator is hidden by the ruins, the crate in this case. Yes, it is. However, part of the side of the vehicle is still visible. The vehicle is obscured and gets +1 to its cover save. So in this instance, the vehicle obscured by a 5+ cover piece of terrain, but because it's at this extreme angle and the model can target both the front and the side, but the front's obscured, so it can only target the side, it will get a +1. So in this instance, it will get a 4+ cover. Now, if we were doing a 4+ ruin save, and let's just assume that this is completely blocked off and you can't see through here, let's say it's like this, 4+ +1, because of the rule, goes to a 3+. So that's it. Now, there are other circumstances where we get things like fire raptors coming in the air, or storm eagles, or thunderhawks, or something that's flying, or a Xiphon even, that's flying up here. The vehicle is behind a ruin, and I know this isn't a storm eagle, it's quite a poor substitution. That is definitely not WYSIWYG. Let's assume your flyer's up here. Say it's a Xiphon, for example. You know, we get into a situation where it is in cover, yes, if you're on the ground, line of sight, but when we're up high, that's where things can get a little bit spicy. So the best advice would be to stick the model in place. Hopefully your Xiphon's fitted on the board and it's in nice alignment, and then you draw your line of sight down. So your line of sight would be here. Now, if you can genuinely draw a line from there to there, that is not 25% obscured, so there is no cover saved involved. And sometimes it's really hard to explain that to your opponent, because as far as they can see, that vehicle is in cover, they get cover. But but we know it's not because of the rule, page 74, the little additional note in obscure targets. Vehicles are not obscured simply by being in terrain, okay? I think that's really, really key. And it all does depend on this 25% rule, obscured or not. Oh, tough. It's always hard, isn't it? When you're playing a game, you want to play a fair game, but one person has been playing in a group of friends and they play a particular way, and then you go to a tournament or you go to an event or you come on the channel and the other opponent plays differently, and then it gets really awkward sometimes. It's like, oh. So situations like this, like the first back to school that we did, is really important to say, look, we've not played each other before. How do you approach this particular thing? How do you approach that particular thing? And I promise you, it will save you so much heartache during the game. And it will save you from that painful moment where you're driving home in the car or on the bus or on the train or whatever you're doing, and you think, my vehicle should not have died at that particular point, or my opponent shouldn't have got a cover save, and if it hadn't have got the cover save, it would have blown his vehicle up, and my contender could have done something else, or whatever, and it's really, really tricky. So, you know, it's just sometimes that these things catch us out. I just think it's really key sometimes to be very clear when you're playing an opponent for the first time, or what you do is, if you've had a bad game or there's been some really questionable rules, perhaps just write the game off down to experience. You've learnt your lesson, and when you go to the club the next week or you meet that person again at another event, you remember, oh, actually, I think I need to re-establish some rules here and just discuss. It's not being a bad opponent, it's just knowing facts and knowing where you stand. And I've seen a lot of games where, particularly on the channel, you know, we've been filming a game and a rule's come up, and then the person's looked to me and goes, well, can you tell me my rule? My answer should be, well, it's not my army. I shouldn't have to know all your rules. You should know your rules, and they don't sometimes. So, you know, your onus is not always to rely on your opponent to remember the rules, because they won't always remember. Nor is it on you as well. I think you just need a really good, well-rounded understanding of the rules. However, it's not always your fault or my fault. The rules sometimes can be quite wild in how they're interpreted. And I think sometimes, instead of getting bogged down in rules lawyering, you just want to play a game, roll some dice and have some fun. And that's absolutely fine, except when your knight or your Spartan full of your Primarch or your Falchion or your Felglaive or your Storm Eagle gets one-shotted out of the sky in questionable circumstances, you know, your heart absolutely sinks to the bottom of your chest. You think, oh, I wish I'd re-established that particular rule or that cover save or the firing arc of that weapon. You know, your heart sinks, and it's a horrible feeling. So I just don't want you to suffer the same heartache that I have. It's just worth establishing some of those rules. All right, that is it. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you realise the importance of knowing your rules and establishing some facts before you have a game against someone you don't play against normally. I hope it's been useful. If you've got any comments, please let me know. And if you have any topics or subjects you'd like me to cover in the end of month review show, please email me direct. It's david@the3kchannel.com, or put a comment below, and I'll try and give you a mention as much as I can. Your Instagram, try and give you a push as much as I can. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.